packet is just a few worksheets, and the situation is that a school, and I'll pass the packet out to you. I'm just going to give you a little background so we can talk about it before you get the packet. Has some plays, and they do different plays in different parts of town. Ready?
Cool. Yeah.
Okay. And so some plays have a bigger attendance. They're more popular, or maybe a bigger theater than other plays. And so your job on every problem is to look at a picture that is, like one of these number line fraction bar situations, and answer some questions. What fraction's occupied? So, Hayes, what do you think that means? What fraction of this is occupied? What do you think it means? Do you know the answer?
1/4.
Okay, so you know the answer. So what it means is what part of the bar is shaded? When you're asked
1/4.
what fraction is occupied, that's right. You're going to answer what part of the bar is shaded. So that's one of the questions that they ask you, because this bar is divided into 4 equal parts, and one of the 4 parts is shaded in. Does that make sense? But then you have to do some percent work, and mostly everybody's done a little percent work in elementary school, and we did a little bit in the fall. And we'll do a lot more and more challenging percent work as the semester goes on. But you have to answer what percent is occupied, and so you have to look at this fraction bar and think about what percent of the fraction bar is red. Okay, so Emma, do you know what percent?
On the first one?
Mm-hmm. So that's the fraction. What's the percent? 25%. So even without sample problems, most of you know that. So on your worksheet, you're going to see a 0%, but they don't put titles like I have been asking you to do. I think it's really helpful to put the titles. And so let's look at the titles that I wrote. They do have a number, but they don't write what that number represents. But the number represents the seats in the theater. Okay, and the red part represents how many tickets were actually sold. So Aiden, in this problem, how would you get the answer? Well, first let's write Emma's answer down. She figured out this is 25%. So if this were 100%, Emma, can you just explain how you knew that was 25%?
Well, I kind of thought of it as $1 and then quarters.
Yeah, 4 parts to $1. That's a perfect way to do that one, right? Because quarter is 25 cents, 25%. That's great. So over here, you would answer 25%. Okay, and so then Aiden on the bottom part, thinking of this like a double number line, this particular theater situation has only 80 seats. Okay, so how many seats does the red represent? And how do you explain that? Like, what was your thought process to get to the answer?
Well, I guess I divided 80 into 4 groups.
You did it right into 4? Okay, and got 20. What's another way somebody might do that? Like, what if, Catherine?
Like half the drink is 40 and then half.
Yeah, with bigger numbers, a lot of times you might, in your brain, just cut 80 in half first, and then cut that half again. So then the total seats occupied, so that would be tickets sold, is just 20. So this is a beginning level problem. It's easier than the ones on your worksheet. But before we talk about the ones on your worksheet, raise your hand if you have any questions about the vocabulary here, or the shading, how I labeled it. Bailey?
So would all of them be 25%? Like 25 and then 15?
So they would be, in this case, because only if they're divided equally, they would be, and you would think back to that double number line concept. Even though each part is 1/4 of it, treat this like a number line so you do count up like you're asking. This would be 50%. And so right here, this would be 75%. So you do count up. So if the problem were a little bit different, and the problem had shading like this, then all of these answers would change, because now the percent occupied would be 75%. And how many tickets would that be?
60.
It'd be 60, because we count up this way too. 20, 40, 60. So even with a different problem, you would use the same thinking. Does that make sense? But I'm gonna go ahead and undo the green, so I don't confuse you. Let's stick to the original problem. Catherine, you are gonna work in your table groups, yes. So let's look at this one. So Naya, here's a different problem. Ignore the scratch paper for a minute. I'm gonna talk to you about scratch paper. But how would you approach this problem? Understanding that it's still a school play, there's still a play, it's in a different place. How many seats are in this theater?
400.
Okay, and so with that information, you have to figure out the fraction occupied, the percent occupied, and the seats occupied. Do you have a strategy? What's different about this? Why is it harder? Let's start with that.
Because it's not cut out like a different spaces.
Put your hands down, guys. So because it's not cut up into the different spaces, can you think of a strategy that could help you here?
Take the 400 and try to find a fraction that would evenly go into that. Or like how many times?
Would you use the purple at all?
Yeah,
What would you do with the purple?
you would use it as a guideline of like one fraction.
Yeah.
Piece.
You see what he's doing? He's kind of, I'm thinking maybe, what does he mean by this, Nick?
Means like taking the length of the purple spot and then just keep putting it, like just keep duplicating it.
Duplicating it, marking it off, right. So you could do that with a scratch paper. You could do that with a ruler, but you should be able to do it without a ruler. So if you had a piece of scratch paper, mine keeps coming apart there, you could just put a little tick mark, like from the corner of the scratch paper, or put 2 tick marks. And then you could, because this is the smart board, I'm going to group this. I didn't mean to get the yellow piece. Let's see what I got. Yeah, okay. So you could mark this off. And I would just keep doing that. So I notice that you just keep marking this off. And you try to be careful, and if it doesn't work out the first time, you should try it again. When I looked at this, I'm trying to mark it off to be that size, and it takes a little bit of time, but you want to take enough time to do a decent job. And sometimes this will work out to be all you need to do. Sometimes this works out just fine. A little off there. And that actually looks like that strategy on this problem would work. So after you do that, then, take a straight edge and take the time to break this up. Now break it into the parts. Now it becomes an easier problem. Katie, do you have a question?
No, I just had a different way of doing it.
Oh. What was your different way?
So I noticed a fourth. So like there's a fourth, and then that's the purple square is half that size of B and B.
Perfect. Because these are lined up, you might have noticed that. Chances are they're not going to be on the worksheet, but that is exactly true here. So that's true. So you knew half of a fourth was an eighth. Nick.
I have a different way of doing it.
Okay.
Is you would just find the half of the line, and then take half of 400 and put it at the half, and you just keep half.
If that worked, it'd be great. And in this case, it does work. Take half, and you know that this is 200, right? And this is 100. And then half again is 50, so we can use your strategy here. It doesn't work on every problem because not every problem has a line right in the middle, but it works here, and that's another strategy you want to try all the time. Try different strategies until you find one that works. So with that information, we can answer some of these questions. So wait for that.
Please excuse this interruption. Vincent Cortez, please come to the main office. Vincent Cortez to the main office immediately, please.
So Liana, in this problem, how many seats are occupied? We're looking at this problem here. So that would be how many seats are in the shaded, does the shaded area represent? That's the fraction. That's the fraction occupied. But how many seats? So the theater, if this theater has 400 seats altogether, but only 1/8 of them have been filled up with people, how many seats is that? 50, right. So 50 seats are occupied. Okay? Does that make sense? You get that? So Elizabeth, how many seats are occupied? That's all the seats in the theater. That's half of the seats in the theater. So how many seats does the purple represent? 50. So the word occupied is referring to the shaded part. Does that make sense? So up on the red one, how many seats are occupied in the first example? 20 seats. Okay. And then Grace, explain to me how you could get the total percent. Remember, the end of the bar is 100%. And the beginning of the bar is 0%. So how would you explain to somebody how to do the percent occupied, the purple part? What do you know? Where's like a logical place to start? What's the logical way to start that? You could. If you're really comfortable with division, that would be a great way to do it. For a lot of people, that might be a hard first step, but you're right. Dividing 100 by 8 gets you to the answer. So that would work. Do you know what 100 divided by 8 is off the top of your head? Okay, so let's figure it out. Cooper, what would you do? We'll figure the answer to that out.
Well, I know the answer to that, but you could start at 50%, which on that one is 200.
Right, so 50% is 200. That's a good starting place, and then keep going. What would you do next?
And you take 100%.
That's 25%, which we saw up here.
Yeah. Then you have to divide 25% in half, and that's 12.5.
Okay, so you have to divide 25% in half, and how do you get that, Annalise? How do you divide 25% in half? Okay, so let's think of a way we can do that, though, without, I mean, like a real specific way. What if I make that 25 a 20 and a 5? What if I divide those in half? What's 20 divided by 2, Annalise? 10. And then, Hayes, what's 5 divided by 2? Like half of $5. 250 or 2.5, right? So look what I did. I took 25 and I wrote it into two numbers that are easier for me to divide in half. Does that make sense? I thought of 25 as 20 and 5. And so, Carson, I've got two answers here. I have 20 divided by 2 is 10. 5 divided by 2 is 2.5 or 2.5. So, yeah, exactly. Add these together and you get 12.5, and that's what goes right here. So even though Cooper and maybe Grace can do, and probably several people in here can divide 100 by 8, sometimes it's easier to just do in half, in half, in half, like we just did there. You have choices. And a lot of times, different ways work best for different people. So Bailey, what percent is occupied in the second example? That's the fraction occupied. 50% is right here. That's not the shaded area.
Oh,
12, which is 12.5%, right? 12.5 is 12.5%. Faith.
It's 67.5%. That's
No.
how much is shaded, and it's 5/8.
What are you? We're on number 2.
Oh, I thought we were on number 3.
We're on number 2.
Never mind.
Okay. Yeah, we're just not there yet. Let's check your answer. How about move to number 3? Are we okay with number 2 now? That the percent occupied is 12.5%. That's 50 seats. Okay, so what is the problem here with marking off the green area?
It doesn't have any lines in it, so it's really hard to distinguish,
Well,
but
there were no lines up here and we did it. We put the lines in.
I just used the lines from the top one to find out.
What if you didn't have the top one?
Then I would,
Not sure?
no, I wouldn't.
That's okay, Aiden.
Well, there's 600 seats, so you could divide it into 6 groups.
But how do you know 6 groups with that picture?
Well,
Katie?
I could start by drawing a line over the green ends,
Okay, so I could draw a line where the green ends. Why would that help me?
because you know it's at the end of the section.
Right?
Oh, I know, okay.
Naya?
Like this much left, so you go there and get it first.
Mark the white off. That's a good idea. So now we're going to use this distance from the corner to there. Okay, and use that. Mark that off. You could go right to left. You can use the unshaded part. So if I group those, not that. Now I can mark that off. I'm going to use the blue though, right? And what did you say the answer was, Faith?
The answer is, I thought it was 67.5 because I used the upper one.
Uh-huh. It
But
doesn't,
it's actually, it was in the thirds, it's 66.6.
okay, so without drawing it the first time, you had a little careless mistake, but you have the right concept. So you want, the message is, when you get your worksheet, you want to make even sections before you write answers down. That's a good idea. Noel?
By the way, because you know it's 600, you could split that up into 100, and that would be a sixth.
What if it didn't? Yes, in this case it would have worked, but it also has to work out that you could break it evenly. And in this case, that would have worked. So that strategy would have gotten you to the answer. It just depends on the picture. Okay? So let's stick with what Naya did, because we've started it that way, and it's nice and clean. There's 3 parts. So what fraction do we have, Trinity, in each part? Like, what's this fraction? Right? And so if this is a third, and this is a third, altogether, how much is the green? 2/3, right? So the fraction occupied is 2/3. Okay, so that was a benchmark fraction that we talked about with double number lines in the beginning of the year. So I know Faith knows the answer because I heard her say it earlier, but that was one of those repeating decimal numbers.
Oh,
Anybody hear what you said? What did you say, Kat?
66.6.
Yeah, 66.6 repeating. So think about it. If this is 100%, and you have to divide it into 3 equal parts, it has to be a number that's bigger than 30, because if you count by 30s 3 times, 30, 60, 90, you don't get all the way to 100. It has to be smaller than 40, because if you count by 40 3 times, you get 40, 80, 120, right? So this answer right here has to be 30 something. And if you remember those benchmark fractions, we wrote it as 33.3 with a little bar over it because it repeats. It's one of those memorizing fractions. And this was 66.6 repeating. So that's the percent occupied. Now, You might not have a perfect memory on that, so that's one we can practice. But Maddie, Misha, let's go to the seats. How many seats does the reading area represent? Start with the beginning, like could you figure out like a strategy? What's your strategy? So start with your number. How many parts do you want to break that into for starters? 3, right? And if you divide 6 by 3, you get 2. So Maddie, how many is 600 divided by 3? Right, 200, right? And once you get that first number, you can just count by 200s, right? So this is 400. Okay. So, I'm going to stop there. On your packet, there's an even more challenging problem at the bottom, but I'm going to leave that one for you guys to think about. This is a good stopping point. And
Run